Hello, this is lesson 2. We will be talking about user input, conditionals, and arrays. So here are the topics we're covering. As always, our reference site is available for you to check out. Here's a QR code and the link to it. So console input. So console input is basically getting input from the user, right? Because if code doesn't get any input from the user, then there's no point in really running it at all. So console input is input specifically from the console or the terminal, where you would type in something and then the code will respond accordingly. For example, we can use scanners, which are a library in Java. It's a Java built-in library, and you would use scanners to get in text input. So in the terminal, if I type in something, the scanner will pick it up and then maybe set it to a variable or use its value to determine something or something like that. Here, as you can see, this hello program, you would put in your name, the scanner will pick it up, and then print out hi, name, and then exclamation mark. If statements. If statements are conditional, where it's basically a statement that based on if the conditional inside the parentheses is true or false, it'll execute one different thing. So as you can see here, if you put in a 4, it's going to execute this command you typed in a 4, and if you didn't put in a 4, it's not going to do anything. We use relational operators in if statements to compare whether or not, to see whether or not the if statement is fulfilled. For example, the equals equals checks if A is equal to B, so we can say something like if variable is equal to 5, then do something. Exclamation mark and equals sign is not equals to, then we have greater or equal to, or greater than or equal to then, or greater than or less than. So you can't use the above equals equals and exclamation mark equals to compare strings, because strings are an object. Doing an equals equals compares location in memory, which primitives share but objects don't. For objects, you would have to use something like dot equals to compare the value of the variable. You can see you can also combine statements using and, or not statements. So not reverses it, or is either condition is true, then the entire thing is true, and both have to be true, otherwise it returns false. You can also use an if statement shorthand like this, so you can see that this condition will return true, or you can just write if condition, because default it checks if it's true or not. There's also else and else if statements. If statements don't need these statements to be valid, but else basically says if the if statement isn't true, then else you will do the other thing. Else if allows you to attach multiple alternatives to an if statement. So if this if statement is equal to 1, then you can see it'll print out 1. Or else if it's equal to 2, you print out 2, and else, you can only have one else in if statement group, but you can have multiple else ifs. We can ignore that. So arrays are also an object similar to strings. And arrays are used to store multiple values together. You can see they are lists, and they're zero indexed, meaning that arrays start at 0 and end at 1 minus the size of the array. You can see here's an example of an array. So index 0 would be 1, index 2 is 2, 3, 4, and 5, and so on. So the size of this array would be 5, but the indexes would go from 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So to recap, we can use scanners to grab user input, and we can use this user input and evaluate it using if, else, and else if statements. And we also have arrays, which can store multiple values together. Thank you for listening.